Good morning, bom dia. So what am I doing here? I'm here to speak about the fish which is trapped in this bulb, about fire, about smoke, and and about this lovely lady. I wish I could tell you that I know her. Unfortunately, I don't. I'm still looking for her. And I have the stupid jokes when my wife is not listening. And thank God this is not online. Because she represents something, which is fashion. I'm a great fan of fashion, which is very obvious, my hairstyle, the way I dress. But I'm very afraid of, especially in management, of all these management speak. Lately, it's been a fashion to speak about innovation, about various types of innovation. And if you recall, some years back, they would use other terms, and then we don't use these terms anymore because they've gone out of fashion. And my work, I see this as something that we should try to avoid, which is go beyond fashion. So the next hour or so I have here, I will try to go beyond fashion. I'll try to look at some of the key things, key issues which are involved in innovation. Metamorphosis. 31 years ago, apple was a fruit. If you type in the word apple today, the first 40 references in Google, you would encounter the firm Apple Incorporated. 13 years ago, Amazon was a river in Brazil. Today, the river doesn't exist anymore. All references, at least the first 20 references, are no longer about the river, but about the technology company which also sells books. Yahoo was something that the cowboys yelled. And we know the story of Yahoo, and so on and so forth. 22 years ago, Windows was a window. Again, if you type in the word, you don't come across the window. Some 2,000 years ago, if you typed in Google the word Socrates, you would probably come across a philosopher. If you type in today, you'd come across somebody else. What am I trying to get at? What is behind all of these firms is something that I call the entrepreneur, the innovator, the person or persons who got together and set about to create wealth. They were not people of great vision. That's a myth. They were people who used to work very, very hard, who still do, and they set up all these companies. Some of them today are valued far more than the GDP of many, many economies. 25 years ago, sun was the sun. And since I'm a university professor and I'm paid to think, I decided to write the formula for success. So here is my formula of success. I'm sure, please don't try to write this down. There is no formula of success. It just doesn't exist. And even though all these gurus go around speaking about, they don't use the word formula, but they speak about process and so on, be careful. They don't exist. So in my own research, my work with companies, my own analysis of cases, instead of speaking about formulas, I think it would make much more sense to speak about some key issues, some key factors, some key commonalities that almost all innovative companies, all innovative organizations have. And this is what I would essentially present now. Somehow this doesn't seem to like my... Well, so I'm going to present what I call the 7 principles. Why 7? There are 7 days of the week, 7 wonders, 7 deadly sins, and so on. But no, I didn't strive to get to 7, but it just happened that in my own work, I tried to reduce the number of factors, the number of those commonalities to the minimum, and what I got are what are the 7 principles. And I do a countdown, and the reason I do is that when I get to 1, you know that this crazy guy is going to stop talking. So I start with number 7. Number 7 is what I call the Heisenberg principle. You probably know this German physicist who worked on quantum mechanics. And he had this principle which says that particles, it's almost, you cannot predict within great accuracy what is the velocity or momentum of a particle, and at the same time, what is the position of that particle. So what I say in innovation is that it's very, very difficult for organizations who are looking for this, because this is very, very normal. Any organization is looking for predictability. It wants stability. It wants confidence, low risk, people who know their work. This is what organizations strive for. Unfortunately, innovation often involves most of the opposite. Innovation involves movement. Innovation involves changing places. Innovation involves shaking up some people. And in the process, very many of these factors that we just spoke about, it's difficult, if not impossible, to keep the stability in place and at the same time try and innovate. I give you the example. This is obviously not mine. Orson Welles, he writes, in Italy for 30 years, under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed. And in the process, what did they do? They produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace. And what did they produce? The cuckoo clock. What we must try to understand here is it's often what I call the controlled chaos that some of the most brilliant ideas, some of the most brilliant organizations succeed. Number 6, betting on infrastructure. Having lived in Portugal, having been living in Portugal for 10, 11 years, I'm used to seeing the way we, especially our politicians, and not just in Portugal, other parts of Europe, how we look about trying to solve problems. So we identify a problem, for example, there is a lack of infrastructure. So let's build infrastructure. There's no entrepreneurship. So let's build incubators, and so on and so forth. And if you remember, I don't know how many of you know this. This is a garage I visited about 2 years back. In this garage was born Silicon Valley, the birthplace of Silicon Valley, where Hewlett-Packard was born, where a professor and 2 of his Stanford University students, about 70 years ago, set up their own company. Here's another garage. Anybody know where this is? This is where Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, they set up their first computer in a garage. Yet another garage. This is a garage where the Google founders, after they left the dormitory, they set up their company here in this garage. So if you look at many of the stories of innovation and entrepreneurs, what you find in common, and what these our great thinkers find in common, is that garages. So solution, let's build more garages. And of course, I'm stretching the point, but the fact is, it's not with infrastructure that you create entrepreneurship or innovation, even within organizations. You just cannot do it. I recently in Portugal, they speak about we need to have more undergraduate students because we have less undergraduate students than other countries in Europe. But it cannot work this way. We cannot just build roads. We just cannot say that we have shortage, so let's, in a certainly artificial way, create more. There has to be a demand in the market. Number 5, in this restlessness we have, the organizations, companies, CEOs, to come up with the next bright thing, there is a relentless pressure, especially on the top organizations, to come up with the best product, the newest product, to make a big, giant leap. But remember, and I don't have, of course, the time for that, if you look at the most innovative products, be they a Segway or be they iPod and iPhones and so on, they were the pioneers, but not in the sense of being the first, the absolute first to come up with the product or the technology. Almost always the technology existed before. However, success comes not from being the first. Success comes from being the first to implement successfully, learning from the errors of other pioneers, adapting the products to make better products suited more to the market, and so on. Success has to do with not trying to sell innovations. Because remember, clients do not buy innovations. A good example is Segway, whose founder just died a few days back. Segway was thought to be the next big thing which would transform the way we go to work, and so on. It didn't happen, and it's probably not going to happen. It created its own niche products and so on, and it's a very, very innovative product. Because clients do not buy innovations. Number 4, should we go for this great, like I said in my previous observation, should we go for this great radical innovation, or should we try to make small changes? There's a big debate out there. If you know Nicholas Negroponte of MIT Labs, a great guru on innovation, technology innovation, he said, incrementalism is innovation's worst enemy, which means that he's saying basically organizations should strive to go right to the top. That's great. However, I urge some caution. Sarkar says, it's a joke, go for both. It's like climbing. You just cannot jump to the top. I say this because I've noticed in talks, I've noticed in conversations and the way many CEOs think, they are looking for this great big thing and they just want to make this big jump, and in the process they spend a lot of resources. No, do it like what I say, like climbing. Take your steps. You have to do both. You have to have the idea that you need to get to the top, and at the same time you need to have the ability to make all the small steps that are involved to get to the top. The bottleneck, I think it was Gary Hamel who said, the bottleneck is really at the top of the bottle. Some years back when I was in sabbatical, I studied the 100 top innovative companies and the corresponding innovative products, which Business Week and Fortune and so on, they publish annually. And what I did was I collected a set of variables which all of these had in common. It was not easy, obviously, but then I got about 40 variables. Then I tried to reduce them even further, and so on and so forth. What I found that all of them had in common was true leadership. And this true leadership doesn't always have to be, visionaries. They don't have to be all Steve Jobs, and they're not all Steve Jobs. Some of them work behind the scenes. They are great motivators. They are able to create great teams, which is almost always the key to success. And recently, it's been a fashion, at least in academic worlds, to speak about intra-entrepreneurship. Let's have this. Let's motivate our workers to create their own products, to pursue their own dreams, like Google has and many other companies have done with some success. And it's called intra-entrepreneurship. It's a beautiful word, but reality is like this. If many organizations, and I have the small checklist of how innovative is your organization, and one of them is this. Many organizations, if you have a great idea, you take your idea to your boss, and he tells you, you're not paid to think. And this happens especially in public sector organizations. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. Because realities of success, we can speak about intra-entrepreneurship, but realities of success is a bit like this. And this is all across, public, private, and so on. And one of the questions I have in my checklist is, how many of your bosses, CEOs, and so on, they like to have smart people around them? And most of them look at me in a funny way because they know what I'm saying and they know that what I'm trying to get at. Many top bosses don't like very smart people around them. They try to set them up in other parts of the companies. If you're unable to create a great team, if the boss is unable to have highly talented people around him or her, innovation cannot happen just by having this in your vision statement. And that's where I'm getting to. The false gods. I've been in this spot talking about some years now, and I'm tired of watching all this, hearing all this blah, 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 blahs. I say this not because out of contempt. I say this because I've learned that we should be very, very careful with words. And especially when you go to organizations, they have all these great vision statements, mission statements, and so on. It's a bit like this. You just put in some words in the software, and then out comes these beautiful, motivating, and so on vision statements. Be careful of false gods. Think for yourself, and this is where I really stop. I call this, find your own I spot. Be they as a person, be they as an organization. If you want to innovate, just discover for yourself, what is it that you're really looking for? Why is it that you need that innovation is the key to the success? And how should you go about doing it? Just to conclude, find your own spot, and most importantly, 3 most beautiful words in English, just do it. Thank you very much.